My name is Alan DeKok. I started Free Radius many, many years ago, and I've been doing Radius ever since. I'm the CEO of Inkbridge Networks, and my talk today is about Radius past, present, and future. So why are we here? We're here because Radius is broken. It's costing everyone time and money. It's been broken since the beginning. That's fine. It was 1983. It was an absolutely spectacular design for 1993. It stood this test of time. And this talk will explain where Radius comes from, who's using it, and what are the problems with it, and what we are doing in order to fix it. The short summary is there are revenue recognition issues with Radius. If you're an ISP doing billing on Radius accounting, the billing is quite likely wrong. We'll get into that later with some of the other talks. And there are substantial security and privacy issues with the Radius protocol. So I've been doing Radius since 1997. I'm the founder of Free Radius. There aren't many people who have been doing it for as long as me, so I can share some unique insights into the past, present, and future of the Radius protocol. Me and my team have helped to design and build thousands of systems worldwide, so Tier 1 ISPs, Fortune 50 companies, and I've written many of the Radius standards at this point. So why do we use Radius? Radius started at the University of Michigan in 1991, and it was intended to solve problems that we still have today. You have thousands of users, you have multiple sites, but you want to have one source of truth. So at Michigan, they had multiple campuses. They wanted to hold all the user accounts centrally rather than copy all the user information to multiple sites. So in 1991, ISPs were still using banks of modems tied to walls. Livingston at the time came up with Radius. It allows for local access control and remote authentication. So for people who are familiar with apartment buildings, you know, if you go into an apartment building, you hit the intercom and you say, hi, you know, I'd like to go to apartment 102. You talk to your friend buzzes you in. That's essentially what Radius does on the protocol level. It controls access to resources. So we have some hopeful years where everyone was very positive about Radius. Livingston brought Radius to the IETF. There have been about 30 years of standardization documents, many, many new use cases, many new authentication methods, many new transports like RADSEC. Radius has become used everywhere. If you need to control access to networking resources, you use Radius. There isn't a lot else. It's a very, very simple protocol to implement. The result is it has a lot of power and a huge benefit for everyone who uses it. So networking and security. Radius uses UDP for a lot of good reasons. The intent originally was that it was sent largely over private networks. It's good enough for 1993. It's still mostly sort of good enough for today. The Radius packets are authenticated with MD5 or HMAC MD5. It's secure, but it's not private. So you can't forge the Radius packets, mostly. But all the data other than passwords that's sent in Radius is sent in the clear. So your name, your location, your MAC address. So it's not a good idea to send this over the internet. There's been only one protocol flaw in the last 30 years, and that's the blast radius vulnerability. And that's because MD5 was largely broken 20 years ago. The solution was to use HMAC MD5. Most of the vendors now have upgraded to using that. And that's a lot more secure, but it's still not private. And I will say, as a personal note, I was noting publicly in 1997 that this was a security issue that should be fixed. So almost 30 years later, the standards have been updated to fix that. Only one protocol design flaw in 30 years. What does that mean? All other claims of radius insecurity are false. If you go on the internet, you see lots of people saying PAP is insecure. PAP sends passwords in clear text across the internet. That is not true. It has never been true. PAP is secure. It's more secure than CHAP for a host of reasons. One of which is if you use CHAP, your passwords have to be stored in clear text in the database and then sent semi-securely over the wire. But the CHAP method is in fact almost the same as the method used to secure the PAP passwords in Radius. So in practice, there isn't much difference on the wire. The main difference is if all of your passwords are stored in clear text, what's going to happen, right? What are the odds of someone breaking into the system and stealing 1 million passwords from your database versus breaking into a Radius server and stealing 100 passwords of people who are in the process of authenticating? It's always better to store your passwords securely in the database. So PAP is more secure. Don't believe random people on the internet. And don't use MS-CHAP. MS-CHAP is worse than PAP. It's worse than CHAP. The only reason to use MS-CHAP is inside of something like TTLS or PEEP. In short, if you've sent MS-CHAP over the internet in the last 20 years, your passwords have essentially gone over the internet in clear text. Anyone with a laptop and 20 milliseconds can break those MS-CHAP passwords. So why is Radius broken? It's secure, but sometimes it's nearly unusable. Sorry? Oh, okay. Many implementations have bugs, bad features. The standards are vague. They hope that people do the right thing. People don't always do the right thing. These issues are costing everyone time and money. Specifically for revenue recognition, accounting very often gives the wrong data. So the Wireless Broadband Alliance that I'm a member of, we've been working for the last year or two on quantifying these issues, and there's a talk later today about this. There's also the issue that proxying barely works. We had very long discussions yesterday with about 20 people in the room, some of the big implementers, some of the operators, EduRoam EU, EduRoam US, Open Roaming, lots of other operators. We have agreement on how proxying is broken and what to do about it. But the truth is the internet is held together with hope and luck. So who does this affect? It affects ISPs, telcos, enterprises, and people in the education market, all in different ways. So what challenges do each of these groups of people have as a result of Radius being broken? So the ISPs, they're still largely using Radius in the same way that they were in the 1990s. Authentication, accounting, authorization, multi-site, millions of users, maybe some proxying. Largely, a lot of the databases are SQL. There's a diagram here of you have multiple sites, multiple Radius servers, databases. These are complicated to set up, but they're complicated at the networking side. The use of Radius is relatively straightforward. So what are the challenges that ISPs see? The behavior of your NAS, GGSN, BRAS is not always ideal. The standards, as I said, are very vague. One example is there's actually no requirement that the accounting traffic have anything to do with the authentication. So I can authenticate as Alan, and all the accounting traffic for my session could say that my name was Bob. People do this, and it costs you money. We've been working with vendors to try to fix this, but it takes time. COA, or change of authorization, is not always supported, so changing services midstream can be hard. Disconnecting people can be hard. In some cases, we've seen ISPs where customer equipment is connected for months after their service has ended. It can be difficult to disconnect this. And in some ISP environments, we're seeing 40 to 50% of the Radius traffic being rejects for users who haven't been online in weeks to months. So these are real operational problems that cost people money. Multi-site access control is hard. I can share my name and password with 5 friends, depending on the structure of the network. We can all log in at the same time and get multiple services for one price. So these are all problems which have to be solved. Telcos, so telecommunications companies, they're similar to ISPs, but they use EAP, EAP-SIM, AKA Prime, Passpoint for Wi-Fi offload, and they use this protocol, which I think is called Diameter. I've never really done anything with Diameter, which I think is a good idea, at least for me. I've been okay enough with Radius. So that's good. I was there at the start as Diameter was being standardized, and I decided not to participate in that and instead double down on Radius. I'm still doing it today, so I can't complain. Challenges for telcos at a very high level. Radius is still often used for accounting, so now you have the same issues that ISPs have. Your accounting data may be wrong, you may be billing users incorrectly, and depending on your local legal requirements, there may be revenue recognition issues. There may be things like SEC reporting issues, where if your CFO is filing financial paperwork and not saying the correct things, there are problems. Mostly people ignore these issues today, but they are very, very real. In addition, SIGTRAN is complicated. ISPs sometimes have issues integrating with SIGTRAN. That can be complicated. Authorization in the telco industry is still often handled by Diameter, so Diameter is still widely being used, but largely in the 3G, 4G, 5G space. So the enterprise, there's very, very little use of Radius in the enterprise market. Personally, I think this is a problem. Mainly where it is used, it's MAC address authentication. MAC addresses can be spoofed, but it's better than nothing. And it's very rare to do 802.1x in the enterprise market. There's very little accounting, but they do have multi-site. My opinion, they should do accounting for a number of reasons, but it's not often done. So the challenges for the enterprise. Configuring the end user device is a nightmare. For whatever reason, it's almost impossible. It should be very, very easy to configure your phone, your laptop for 802.1x. It's hard. There are paid MDM solutions which solve this. Everyone is happy to charge you $5 a user a month for solutions, and many people decide not to do this. The issue is, without authentication, your networks are wide open. So you might be doing PSK for Wi-Fi. I can share it with my friends, my family, people on the street. That means if I'm let go from an organization, I can walk into the parking lot. I'm still on the network. I might not be able to log into the servers anymore, but being on the network is still a problem. I can print things off. I can attack people's machines. It's a security issue. So you might have a firewall for your local network, but that's like putting a lock on your door and your window is wide open. Anyone can get access to your network. Also, without accounting, you don't know who's on your network. Again, you fire someone, they're still on the network. You don't know where they are. You don't know what devices there are. Security is all about information. And if you don't have that information, you cannot be secure. Education. Education market is largely roaming and edu-roam, often a large amount of proxying with roaming users. You see here, like the University of Michigan in 1991, you have a main campus, you have satellite campuses, you can clone configurations back and forth between the satellite campuses, but your radius servers at the edge will generally proxy to the core where all your authentication is done. The education market has a fairly unique use case where every hour on the hour, 40,000 people close their laptops, walk across the hallway, and open up their laptops again. So you have these big storms of authentication. And that doesn't happen so much in the ISP market or in the enterprise market, where people are, for ISPs, you're logged in for days at a time. So there's some unique use cases here. There's multi-site, but often no accounting again. The challenges for education is that they're very resource constrained. They're much more budget conscious than a lot of other people. And as I said, you have this issue of many people re-authenticating very often. The result is there's very, very high loads on the radius systems. And if you don't do TLS session resumption, which is a way to cut down a lot of those authentications, the load on the database goes up even more. Often ISP environments enterprise environments have to provision systems much bigger than the equivalent ISP environment. So while they're budget constrained, they have to manage and build bigger systems. So the future, how are we going to fix this? Historically, people work in their own silos, they come up with their own solutions. There is the IETF, there's a radius working group at the IETF. Not as many people show up to that as there was 10 or 15 years ago, but this is costing everyone time and money. The idea that the radius protocol is broken is known individually, but the purpose of this conference, among other things, is to get everyone in the room and to get everyone to agree on what's broken and how to fix it. So my recommendation for everyone is join a mailing list, join something, tell people the problems you're running into, because likely there will be other people who have the same issues, and other people then can contribute to making a solution. In the short term, what are we doing? We have local workarounds. Everyone comes up with their local solution. Radius TLS is being standardized and updated. The recommendation is ideally everyone should switch to TLS transport, even inside your own private network. It's 2025. There's no reason not to use TLS everywhere. There are a number of benefits to this. We're making changes which should make proxying more robust. We're defining things like a status realm packet, which is trace route for radius. You know, can I get to this particular domain? And it can query every individual hop along that path and give you some information about that. The longer term, and this is some of the outcome from yesterday, we will be writing a best practices radius proxying document, which is collating all the knowledge of everyone in the room, everyone that has been doing radius proxying for, in some cases, 20, 25 years. That will be getting published in the IETF as recommendations from everyone. We'll be updating the radius standards with more recommendations as to what to do. The conclusions from yesterday were that there are a few changes we could make to implementations to make radius proxying more robust. And the more implementations that do this, the better off everyone is. We will be writing new standards to recommend changes to the radius protocol to support this, and also suggesting a lot more positive behavior. The standards written in 1993 and 1996 were vague and hopeful. We've learned since then that it's much better to be very, very prescriptive and to say exactly what should happen. For example, one of my personal pet peeves is people saying that something is allowed by the standard. In almost every case, that's not true. The standard doesn't forbid it. Like, there's no statement in the standard saying you are allowed to have someone log in as Alan and send an accounting packet with user Bob. It's not allowed. It's just not forbidden. It's the wrong thing to do. Most people don't do it, but some people do. Any questions and comments? Sorry?
I feel like the light has gone.
Yes. That was relatively quick.
So actually, yeah, we have a couple of questions that came up on the chat. Thanks everyone who's attending from all around the world. We've got people from Malawi and Italy and Austria and Turkey, all over the world. So this is really great to see the community coming together. So there's a question here. Alan refers to the fact that with MS Chap, there somewhere has to be a database of NT hashes of user passwords, be it in your AD. If someone steals the database, they've got all your passwords.
Yes. So the NT hash of your password is an MD4 hash, and MD4 was broken even before MD5. The conclusion of that is that if you have what are called rainbow tables, among other things, perhaps a couple of terabytes of disk space, which is, you know, maybe a few $100s, few €100 at this point, it is possible to take that NT hash and convert it to a password in milliseconds. So if your password is in the database as NT hash, it's clear text. Similarly for MS Chap, there was an attack published called Asleep. That was, I believe, 2002. And I must admit, having written standards since then and participating in the Radius and Radext working group, we did not update the RFCs to recommend not using MS Chap. So in the past 20-something years, there are still products shipping which use MS Chap. And due to design flaws in MS Chap, anyone with a laptop, a few hundred gigabytes of disk space, and 10 milliseconds can turn MS Chap into the clear text password. It's trivial. So there is an internet draft now which is deprecating insecure practices in Radius. Finally, 20-something years later, it says, don't use MS CHAP. So the recommendation for vendors, at least, of networking equipment is do not let people configure MS CHAP. It's broken.
Okay, yeah, there's another related question, and I'm not sure if you already answered it. I was under the impression that MS CHAP in AD was based on NTLM hash,
Yep.
true or false, but I assume you're referring to non-TLS tunneled EAP and not PEEP MS CHAP.
So if you do PEEP MS CHAP, that authenticates and secures the connection between the supplicant and the Radius server. So all those Radius packets that go back and forth, EduRoam, if they go across the internet, all that is secure. The MS CHAP data is sent inside of a TLS tunnel inside of PEEP. And in most cases, in EduRoam, that in turn is sent inside another TLS tunnel for RADSEC. So that is essentially secure. When I talk about MS CHAP being insecure, that's if you're just doing Radius and sending MS CHAP inside of a UDP packet, that is insecure. For NTLM, due to the way Microsoft has implemented Active Directory, the only way to authenticate users using MS CHAP is to use I think it's a 1993 protocol that Microsoft came up with called NTLM, and it's essentially MS CHAP over the local network. Microsoft has been trying to deprecate that for about 3 or 4 years. They've announced repeatedly it's going away, and they stop announcing it because so many people are using it and there is no alternative. The recommendation for people who use PEEP MS CHAP is you have to secure that link between your Radius server and your Active Directory server, because those MS CHAP NTLM passwords are going across that link essentially in the clear. So that link has to be very, very secure. Or use TTLS PAP, which then lets you take the clear text password in the Radius server, hand it off to Active Directory, and then get an answer yes or no. So that again is one of these reasons why it may not seem like it at first, but in almost every case, doing PAP is more secure than anything else like CHAP or MS CHAP.
Yeah, I know that's sometimes a controversial stance, but yeah, it's something that we've been talking about a lot at Anchorage.
Yeah.
So there's another question about Free Radius 4.0.
Yay.
Which will be coming out very soon.
And everyone in the room laughs. Yeah. Thank you. You are right to laugh. Yeah. So yes.
Well, I'll tell you the specific question, then maybe you can talk about
Sure.
V4 more generally. I noticed the alpha version is available with TACACS Plus support.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a bit more about that? Is it going to replace TAC Plus?
Sorry, let me get some water.
Yeah, he's sweating now.
Thank you. So I'll answer the question on V4 generally first. V4 is perhaps suffering from the second system syndrome, which is the first thing you build is great, it mostly works, you build it in a rush, it's fine, and then you want to fix it, and then you realize you want to fix something else, and then you realize you want to fix something else. And many, many years later, you're still fixing things. So that's what we've been doing. It's been 10 years, now almost 11 since we released 3.0. The good news is there are more people working full-time on Free Radius now than there were 10 years ago. The bad news is there's now largely a business behind Free Radius, and paying customers do sometimes get in the way of hacking on Free Radius, which is fine. The truth is V4 is turning into the server that I always wanted it to be. So it is no longer a Radius server with Radius welded into the server core. Radius is just one protocol out of many. V4 will do natively Radius, DNS, DHCP v4, DHCP v6, TACACS, VMPS, BFD, and my favorite is LDAP sync. It will listen on an LDAP replication protocol, all in the same server at the same time. There are very good reasons for doing this. It's very useful. As for replacing TAC Plus or other TACACS servers, that's perhaps up to you. If you're used to TAC Plus and it works, why not? Keep using it. V4 does not work exactly the same right now as some of the traditional TACACS servers. There are good reasons for that. But at the same time, if you configure V4 to use TACACS, you can store the TACACS data in LDAP, MySQL, Postgres, anything you want. And historically, the old TAC Plus, TACACS servers do not support that. So there's a lot more functionality there in V4. The good news is, I know I've said this before, but it's more true today. We're finally getting closer. The two features that we need before we're happy with V4 are RADSEC and statistics. For the modern age, and especially Eduroam, you don't want to run a Radius server without RADSEC. And especially for the enterprise market and the ISP market, you want to know what the Radius server is doing. So you want those statistics. But internally, there are no more major architecture changes to make. There are no more syntax changes to make. It is similar enough to V3 that people will recognize it, but a lot of the weird and confusing things in V3 are gone, and it just makes more sense. So we're very, very happy with it. And unless more customers get in the way of releasing V4, we would very much like to release it this year.
So actually, on that note, there's another comment/question. Once again, thank you for all the work you guys do. We are extremely grateful. We, of course, know it's difficult to give an exact date, but do we have a ballpark as to when FreeRadius v4 will be ready to be used in production?
The truth is today we have customers using it in production. If you're an ISP environment and you have some other way of getting at some of the statistics, you're happy with V4. If you're not doing RADSEC, TLS, you're happy with V4. We have people using it today in production for DHCP, for Radius, for TACACS. It's stable. One of the things we've done with V4 is put a lot more effort into things like static analysis. So it's written in C. C is notorious for issues. So every continuous integration build that we push back is run through 2 or 3 different static analyzers. We have automatic protocol fuzzers that run and consume enormous amounts of CPU time. So we're very, very confident that there are no external exploits, that it's stable. There still may be issues, but as compared to V3, we have hundreds of automated tests, and we're adding more all the time. So in terms of time frame, I would very much like to release it this year. Depending on timing again, I would be very happy if we could release it in October. I know I've said similar things before, but I'm a lot more confident the fourth time around.
Okay, we've got a couple of very tactical questions here. So in Radius setup, which needs to handle more than 15,000 transactions per second, what would be the best database to use for authentication? And what's the optimal architecture you suggest for this kind of scenario?
That's always a complicated question. The reality is we've tested even v3 at 20,000 packets a second. So the Radius server's fine. When we've tested v3 against Open LDAP, just for authentication, Open LDAP is fast. We can do 20,000 authentications a second. That's not with EAP. EAP lowers that by a factor of 2 or 3 because of the overhead. When you start doing SQL, SQL is a lot slower. When you start doing accounting, you get a lot slower. Writing all that data to an accounting database is very, very, very slow. A lot of accounting databases can only do a couple of thousand SQL writes a second. The short answer is you're almost always better off taking the Google approach, which is lots of small boxes rather than a big box, right? The summary I like to say when people ask me this question is, if you have a small number of users, you have a small budget, and your design really doesn't matter. You're getting 100 packets a second. My iPhone can run that. I mean, people were running ISPs on something with 1/10 of the CPU power 20 years ago. So if you have a small ISP, small university telco, it doesn't matter. Any database is fine. Any Radius server is fine. Any CPU is fine. If you have a couple of million users, your design matters more than anything else, and you have budget to buy 5 systems rather than 1. And if you have 5 systems, you get 5 times the performance, and you also have stability and failover. And if you lose 1 system, you care a lot less. So design almost always matters more than database.
Okay, we have another, so just another comment about V4, just appreciating
Why do people hate me?
No, actually, they were expressing appreciation. I understand the difficulties and thank you for all your work in this. So, yeah, but we have meetings every week where we're like, okay, what's the progress on V4? We're moving it forward. So it is being very actively worked on. It's a really top priority for us. And
honestly, I mean, when I started this in 1999, it was a side project. I had started doing Radius at a previous company. The open source Radius servers at the time were very, very few. The main one was Sistron out of the Netherlands. He was accepting patches, but not a lot. And when I left one company that was doing Radius, I decided to start up free Radius and very quickly got a lot of patches. The original design was very explicitly with a plugin design because I didn't think I could understand everything about LDAP, SQL, etc. And very quickly, we got patches for all kinds of different backends. There was a very, very active community for about 10 or 15 years helping with the server. That's died down a little bit as the functionality of the server has gotten good enough for almost everyone. And there are fewer contributions to V4 because at this point, V4 is about double the size of V3 in terms of code. It's a lot harder to understand. And if you're doing patches for it on the side, it's a lot harder to keep up with people who are doing it semi-full-time at a job. So I understand, but the feedback from the community is still absolutely valuable for us. It's been very, very important for the success of the server.
Okay, so there's a couple more super technical questions.
Sure.
Just a best practices for free radius for password filtering.
Yeah.
So it says we can do this inside the site by directly writing the script needed or using policy.d/policies, then importing the policy to the site. What's the best place to do this?
So it depends on what you mean by password filtering or password checking. Generally, I probably wouldn't. I mean, it depends on what you mean. If you're trying to enforce a password policy, that you have good passwords, Radius is not the place to do that. That should be done in some interface which lets the user change the passwords. If you're trying to enforce some kind of authentication authorization for users, Radius is the place to do that. But I'd have to know more about what the question exactly means.
Okay. So maybe the person who wrote that can add some more detail in the comments. If we have time, we'll get to that. In the meantime, there's another question. I've been working with remote access since 1997 and Radius, and you talked a lot. You talked about a lot of failed attempts. Is there any good ways to block these, like a DDoS filter-ish?
Yeah, so that's one of the topics we were talking about yesterday. You know, as a bit of a side note, when I started this, I mean, we had talked with Kari and Heki from Radiator. I was originally planning to go to Thailand for the IETF. Finland's on the way, right? Stop in and say hello. And this very quickly turned into 15 or 20 people showing up and talking about Radius, which I didn't expect. It's wonderful. Yeah, sorry. I lost my train of thought there.
So, any way to block?
Oh, block, yes.
DDoS.
So we talked about that. There currently are no provisions in the Radius protocol for doing this. Everyone is coming up with a solution themselves. The traditional solution in any kind of thing like this is you have a negative cache. You cache users who fail. DNS does something similar with negative caches. It's very well known in computer science. You count who fails, you cache them, and you send cached rejects rather than hitting your database. Because looking up something in a cache in memory is much faster than touching a database. That being said, some of the proposals yesterday were changes to the Radius protocol so that the home server could send information back up through a proxy stream to say, please cache this reject and some other information, right? I know this user is gone. This user has been authenticating 100 times a day. Please send rejects on my behalf for this user for the next hour, the next day. We're writing an internet draft on that, which should be an RFC sometime in the next couple of years. But we have general consensus among all the implementers to do this. So the major Radius servers will be supporting this in the future. So in the short term, negative cache is all you can do. In the longer term, the standards will be updated. And even before the RFCs are published, the implementations have all agreed on the best way forward. And you should be able to just effectively turn a policy on, and all that cache information gets pushed to the edge and automatically handled by the implementation. So that's a big step forward.
Okay, that actually was the last question. So thanks everyone for your engagement with this. It's always really great to have so many thoughtful questions.